Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs, the podcast for burned out, career-minded moms who are ready to stop pretending everything's fine and feel like themselves again. I'm your host, Christy Gamir, burnout coach for moms, licensed therapist, and mom of two. And I'm here to help you reclaim your energy, your identity, and your peace of mind. Whether you're lying awake thinking about the 87 things you didn't get done, or silently resenting the people you love most, this is your space to feel seen, supported, and not so alone. So grab your coffee, hot, cold, or day old, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's Christy. Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs. Before we get started today, I wanted to share something that I think is pretty exciting. So today's the release of the 50th episode of this podcast, which means 2 weeks from today, on June 30th, 2026, it will be the release of weekly episode number 52. So that is the date I will officially be celebrating 1 year of the Overcaffeinated and Out of F's podcast, which I feel like is a really big deal and something to be celebrated. So for the last several weeks, I have been thinking about what I want to do for that, and I'm going to announce those things on that day. So 2 weeks from today, June 30th. So be sure to listen. Okay, so on to today's episode, number 50. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome our guest, Tina O'Keefe. Tina started her career in public relations, is a published author, and served in the Peace Corps in Ukraine from 2003 to 2005 in the Economic Development Program. After a career in writing and communications, Tina started her own organizing business. She has served as the Chief Organizing Officer of Stow and Behold for the past 12 years. She resides in Stewart Manor, Long Island, with her husband and 3 daughters, Dahlia, who's 19, Juliana, who's 16, and Patricia, who's 14. They have a dog, an Australian blue heeler named Luna. So I've invited Tina here today to talk about her own personal story with burnout as a working mom, and to also talk a bit about how she helps so many other moms clean up the messiness in their own lives. So Tina, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Do you mind just starting off by telling us, a little bit more about yourself, your career journey, how you got into the work that you do now as a professional organizer?
Well, to wrap it up neatly with a bow, I like to say that I'm a storyteller. I used to love creative writing as a kid. I wanted to go into advertising when I was studying in college, so I focused on like an English and communications major, and um, and that sort of is like the theme of all the jobs I've had. I've worked in public relations. I did grant writing in the Peace Corps, and a lot of like program writing and things like that. And then I'm a communications consultant doing a lot of like editing and just a lot of corporate communication type stuff. And I was a freelance copywriter. And as a freelance copywriter, I was sent to an entrepreneurial conference for women to represent a client. And one of the speakers was an organizer. So that was back in 2005. And a light bulb went off. I had never heard of that before, really. So I was like, wow, I didn't know that's something you could do for a living. And so I, of course, approached this organizer like I'm a groupie at a concert. Like, I think you're so cool. And she's like, are you interested in organizing? Like, tell me about yourself. And so we started talking. We met a few times. She hired me to work under her brand. She was expanding her business from New York City into Queens and Long Island, which is where I lived. So it made sense to do that. And I was doing that on the weekends. So I was essentially working 3 jobs. I was a communications consultant, a freelance copywriter, and then on the weekends I was doing this. And then I got pregnant. And so my energy level kind of plummeted and I couldn't sustain 3 jobs anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to stop the organizing. And then fast forward, the communications consulting was kind of my primary focus. And then I got laid off when I was pregnant with my second daughter. And I started doing the copywriting here and there when I could, but I was juggling the 3 kids and, all the other stuff. And finally, after my third daughter was born, my husband was like, okay, what's the plan here? Are you going to go back to consulting? What do you want to do? And I'm like, I've got these 3 kids here, like, my options are a little bit limited, childcare's expensive, so I'm not sure, and with freelance copywriting, I've personally never felt like I was being compensated for the time that I was putting in to the work I was doing, like, there was a lot of editing going on, and it's like, I'm dealing with small businesses with limited budgets, and I just kind of felt like, "Am I really getting compensated?" I was a little bit unsatisfied. And my husband's like, "Well, what about the organizing thing? Like, you seem to really like that, and, um, it's another way to set your own hours and et cetera, et cetera." So I said, "Alright, let me give it a try." So I made up a business name, and I went up to other moms outside the school at pickup, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
"Hey, listen, I'll organize a room in your house for free
Uh-huh.
in exchange for before and after pictures." And every single one of those moms was like, "Absolutely no way. I would never let you look at my house. I hide the mess when people come over. I am not inviting you to come over and see my mess. It's super embarrassing." And looking back on it now, like, this was at, 2013, Marie Kondo hadn't hit yet, the home
Uh-huh.
hadn't hit yet, like, this was, like, organizing was the only TV show was Hoarders,
Uh-huh.
and so it
Mhm.
was, like, it's, like, stigmatized a little bit, so I understood people were embarrassed, but the conversation kind of led to, but, my mom needs help, my dad needs help, my aunt needs help, and I kinda got pushed to helping older people, and so then that's kinda how I kind of established my business, um,
Uh-huh.
by working with seniors, and then I learned a lot about, like, behavior and about, like, people's, relationship to their possessions, and so I kind of really just got my good experience with that, and then I was able to now, kinda circle back. I still help seniors. I help a lot of seniors and people with physical challenges, but I do also have a lot of, like, moms and dads and couples that I work with, so and now I kind of do, like, the full spectrum, and I love it.
Well, and I kinda had to laugh only because, when you were talking, when I was listening to you talk, I was expecting the response of course you can come in for free and, exchange for these photos." But then after you said, like, they were all absolutely not, I mean, really, that makes sense because I'll tell you the number of moms that I work with, there's so much stress and anxiety for so many of these moms around allowing people to see their space. I think a lot of moms really are embarrassed and they do have these expectations for themselves. And so, um, listening to you say that, I guess really shouldn't have been surprised by that response because it is something that so many people struggle with. And to your point, I think, when we talk about expectations, maybe it is stigmatized a little bit when maybe it really doesn't need to be because it is something so many people struggle with. It is so hard to keep up with all the things.
Mhm.
And that's really why we're here, right? To talk about how we can help these moms feel better about stuff, have tips and strategies, know that they're not alone in these things, all of that. So,
Absolutely.
um, okay, so really, you kind of went through these career changes. It sounds like there were some pivots and ultimately you just decided that this was what was going to work best for your family. It sounds like it was what um you really enjoyed. So that's awesome. So, I'm curious then. So, based on your experiences with, specifically the moms, the busy working
Mhm.
moms that you work with, what would you say are some of the most common struggles that you do see behind the clutter?
I think, going back to what you said, the expectations,
Mhm.
people are really hard on themselves because we live in a social media world where it's like, the home edit and people are organizing their candy by color. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's something really practical. And so people have very high expectations of themselves. And so they're hard on themselves. Um, so I do think that people struggle with the idea that it has to be like so pristine. Like
Mhm.
you should have no signs of having children when you have multiple children. Oh, I just lost my earpod.
I'm
Sorry.
gonna I'm gonna
Um,
mute.
and and it's- so that's one thing that I find. I sometimes there has to be a reality check to say like when you have kids of a certain age, there is a volume of stuff that is not going to go away, and the question is not like making it disappear because it's not possible unless you have one of these like retractable ceiling things where it's like you, like, send them into the ceiling, like, it's just not like the microphone at the Oscars that, like, goes into the ground, like,
Mhm.
that's not that practical. So I just say, like, it's more practical, and you're gonna feel better about yourself if you just have designated spaces where, like, these are the spaces that the children are allowed to be children, that this is where they play, and and depending on the size of your home, sometimes that means that that's going to be a shared space for X amount of time until the kids are of a certain age where they're more mature and they can play in their rooms alone. But like when they're a certain age, your eyes got to be on them. So you want them to be close to the kitchen. You want them to be close to where you're spending your time. If you're working from home, you got a desk set up. Like you've got to be practical and having those areas cordoned off and saying, okay, this is where the kid stuff is going to live. I'm not going to let it like leak from here. We're
Mhm,
not going to let it leach. We're going to try to contain it here, but they're allowed to be kids here. This space is allowed. My home is allowed to show that I have children. Like that's okay because I
mhm,
do.
mhm, mhm.
So, and I think if we give ourselves that kind of grace and just say like, this is part of my life right now, then I think you'll feel better and that stress maybe will be a little bit alleviated a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and to your point, just sort of accepting that maybe this is the part of the season of life. I think back to, my husband and I are now in our second home together, and our first one, was much smaller, and so we didn't really have a designated space. It was our it was our family room. Toys took over the family room. I mean, now we're fortunate that we have a basement, so we try to kind of keep things there. But the thing is like there are toys are just they're gonna be there. Kid stuff is gonna be there. There's no way to, like, completely even now when we have a basement, our stuff still makes it up to our family room. It's just not possible to completely expect it all to go away. So, like, managing those expectations. Um,
Hmm.
I'm curious, so, like, so as we're talking about expectations, beliefs, things that we tell ourselves, what do you think most moms maybe get wrong about organization? Like, what are maybe either some of the mistakes that they make or misconceptions that they have, like those kinds of things?
So this is not just a mom thing. This is like any client that I have. I send out an agreement. My process is, we talk on the phone. And sometimes I might say, send me some pictures so I can just kind of get an idea of what's going on. But either way, it's like that I need that initial in-person visit to understand what's happening. And before that visit, I send an agreement. And the agreement is like really plain English. And the first thing it says is like, it's like, don't do anything before I come.
Mhm.
You need to have some garbage bags. Having garbage bags like black bags, white bags, clear bags helps to delineate the different things we're sorting. Empty boxes if you have them. Everyone's got some Amazon boxes somewhere. But do not go and buy anything. You don't need to buy anything.
Mhm.
And the number one thing that people do the moment they want to get organized is they want to go to the Container Store. They want to go to Walmart, Target, wherever they're going to go. And they're going to buy their little hearts out of like all these different plastic containers and bins and acrylic and the baskets. And then they're going to try to take their stuff and shove it into these items that are not made to necessarily hold them. And then they're going to get frustrated that their organization process is not working. So I always say, like, don't buy anything. I know it's
Mhm.
tempting. You are gonna get to buy stuff if you want to. You don't have
Mhm.
to. That's not part of what I'm pushing.
Mhm.
But if you fit, if as we're organizing, the first step is to take everything out, assess it, put back what you're gonna keep, and get rid of the stuff you're not keeping. And then we measure. So we measure like the shelves, the height, the width, the depth, and all that kind of stuff. And then we look at what's the right container to contain this type of toy. And what's the end game? Does mom take the toys out and lay them out for the kids? Or do the kids need access? Do we need bins that are smaller so that they're not too heavy? Like all these, should they be clear? We'll make all those decisions, and that's a very personal thing, so we talk about those things, but then you go and buy, and so the
Mhm.
success is gonna be a lot higher if you've measured and you've already done the inventory and you know what you need, so
Mhm.
the things that you're buying are gonna really work, and then you're gonna feel way better about the process. If you just go and buy and start trying to shove things into places and, like, you put the basket in, the door won't close because it's too long, and you're
Mhm.
so frustrated, and, like, a lot of that can be eliminated if you just wait. I know it's hard because the first thing we wanna do is buy. People love office supplies, they love their organizing stuff, and it's so tempting, but I always kinda say, "Let's hold on and wait, and then we'll buy it."
Well, which I imagine is part of the problem too, right? Because you don't wanna be the whole point is to organize things, maybe maybe even getting rid of some things if that's part of your process, but certainly not adding unnecessary things, right? So it sounds like
Right.
figuring out what exactly you need first before, so you're not just buying things that then you have nothing to do with later.
Exactly.
So, okay, so I'm curious, to hear a little bit more about because it's such a hard thing for so many people. And a big part of it, we talked about why people feel badly about it because of their expectations, but I also think it's really hard for a lot of moms because of things such as limited time. But I imagine there's more to it than that. And so I'm curious to hear like what are your thoughts about, some of like the mental or emotional challenges that maybe make it hard for these moms either to keep up to even when systems are in place to maintain those systems. So, you know, things like the mental or emotional overload, things like decision fatigue, things like deeper things that might be going on contributing to the messiness. Like, what are your thoughts about that?
So I do think that there is a huge guilt factor going on with
Mhm,
a lot of the stuff, and a lot of people now struggle with the keeping, like, what do I keep? And moms of all ages are guilty of their kids are grown up and out of the house, and they're like, "Oh, I can't get rid of this because it's Johnny's, and Johnny loved this toy." And
mhm,
it's like, "Whoa, Johnny is a doctor living in California."
mhm.
Um, and when I speak to I do a lot of public speaking on organizing, especially to seniors, but one of the things I always kinda tell them is, you clean out, someone's room, and they're adults and they've grown up and they're out of the house. And parents always think that the kids are gonna want all this stuff, and then the kids come home and say, "I don't want it." But they fight you and they say, "No, no, no, he really does want this." And so this one was, this kid had a bar mitzvah, and they had a giant cutout of him, giant,
Mhm,
from when he was 13 years old, dressed up like a baseball player.
mhm.
And he was a little chubby, he had braces, he had acne. This is not really his shining moment in the sun, I think. And they were like, "Oh, no, we have to keep this because it's Johnny's." And I'm like, "Okay, where does Johnny live right now?" And it's, "Oh, Johnny lives in California. He's a very successful doctor. He has a beautiful wife." And I was like, "Oh, do you think that Johnny wants his beautiful wife to see this giant picture of him in probably the most awkward phase of his life?" And they were like, "Oh, no, of course he wants to keep it." And so they called him. I said, "I want you to call him." And so they called him about we had a list of questions, and they were like, "We have his cutout." And he's like, "What? Why did you get rid of that? You've gotta throw that away." Like, he was absolutely horrified. And I
Mhm,
was like, "I don't wanna say I told you so, but I kinda told you so." And I think I see this all the time. You're going through a pile of, like, the kids' artwork that got thrown into bins and boxes and bags, and then the parents are like, "Oh, it's just that they made this stuff, and it's, like, so precious." And I'm like, you're half of these things are, like, things that every kid walked out of the school holding that day, and there wasn't an
mhm,
original thought. Focus on the things that are original thoughts, in my opinion.
mhm.
Something that they made that's unique to you, to your family, a drawing that they made of you. But, like, this coloring the rainbow fish, I mean, come on, like, we have to pick and choose a little bit. So, and I do kind of feel like I have little tricks in terms of, like, those things that we're gonna hold on to. Instead of putting them all in a bin that says Johnny on it, like, take all the Christmas things that he made that are special and unique, and then
Mhm,
put them with your Christmas decorations so that when Christmas time comes, you take them out and then you put them around and you kind of enjoy them until they
mhm.
start to fall apart, and then you get rid of them little by little, over time. But I think you enjoy them more in that respect. So if you can connect them to the seasons a little bit, that will help. And also, being a little bit, not being critical, but being a little bit like, what's actually original and meaningful and sentimental versus just because he took a glue stick and put a feather on this does not make it like that. There's no sentimental connection, and trying to kind of separate those things a little bit so that we're not overwhelmed with the amount, because kids do produce at a certain age. They're factories
Oh my
of arts
gosh,
and
yes.
arts and crafts, and it's like you're drowning and you
Mhm,
can't keep every single one of those.
mhm. Well, and I will say, so I have a kindergartner and I try to do very much what you're saying, and one of the things is like, okay, so a lot of times he'll bring home something that says I love mommy. And I immediately think like, well, this is special. It says I love mommy. Like it's I don't, someday he's not gonna be making those kinds of things. But the reality is he probably comes home with something that says I love mommy about 20 times a week. So they're special, but maybe I don't need like every single one of them. And so I do. I allow myself to get rid of a bunch of them. But I'm curious, like with all these things that you're saying, do you find that it's harder for people who are, say, in the middle of raising young children versus the ones who have the adult doctors, living their best lives?
Yes, yeah, definitely when you're in the moment, you're like, "I wanna keep everything. I wanna hold on to it." And I think, add another layer of, like, the working parent who's maybe, not there physically all the time, like, especially if you're working out of the home. So I think that there's a little bit even more attachment because you're like, "Oh, I miss moments a lot, so I wanna keep this stuff because I'm missing these moments." And so maybe, like, those things are kind of interconnected a little bit. I'm
Mhm.
not a therapist. I'm
Mhm.
not a psychologist. It's just like a theme that I see sometimes,
Mhm.
in my interactions with people. And again, it's just, sometimes you gotta pick your battles. And
Yeah.
so I'll say, "Let's corral the work into a bin and then, and try to label it by even if you take a piece of, like, wax paper,
Mhm.
like a sheet, like, for baking, and you rip it off, and then you lay it on you lay it on the bin and then, like, write kindergarten, and then you layer almost like you're baking, like, a lasagna, I guess. Like, just something to corral things a little bit by time, and then that might allow you to go back and then sort it a little bit more, and then you could say, "Okay, this is all the kindergarten stuff. Let me go through this, give it a second pass, and pull some things out that are kind of, like, not
Okay.
that great." I think the first step is corralling it. If you're really struggling with anything organizing wise, like if your trigger is pictures, if it's memorabilia, whatever that thing is, if it's really torturous to you, like I'm not there to make you cry. I'm not there to
Mhm.
like be like, I'm taking away all your stuff.
You're there
That's
to
not who
help.
I'm trying to I'm trying to
They
help you.
call.
So then I'm like, let's pick our battles. Like, let's put this aside. This is a trigger item. Let's put it
Yeah.
aside. But let's put it in a bin and put it, maybe a bin that goes under the bed or something, like just to kind of make it like, all right, this is all, at least it's all corralled. And then maybe another time in the future when you're a little bit more separated from it, you'll be able to take another pass at it and have a
Okay.
better time.
Well, so and you're talking a lot about, the challenges with people and like their emotional attachment. What about, the people who are holding on to things more because of, they're concerned that maybe they're going to need it again someday. Don't want to get rid of something just to have to buy it again in a year or 2 or 5 years or whatever. And so as a result, they just don't want to really get rid of anything because they don't know. How do you help those people?
I tried to figure out how practical is it for you to keep it? If you have a humongous house with a lot of closets and you really want to keep this item because you think you might need it, then okay, like we can talk about it. If you have a very limited space and you have not used this item in several years, there's a very small chance you're going to use it in the future. And depending on how it was stored, if it's in its original box, maybe you've got a shot at it. But if it's technology, it's probably going to get outdated. If it's clothing, it's probably going to start to get worn over time. It's not going to be that fashionable anymore, although everything comes full circle these days, but
Mhm.
whatever. And then, like, if it's been not been maintained well, then chances are when you go to use in the future, it might not even work. Like if it's been exposed, if it's wet, if it's rusty. So trying to make decisions about things and being really practical and mindful of how much space it exists and what the priorities are.
Mhm.
If you're 80 years old and you're trying to keep the giant push lawnmower because you're like, "Oh, I might need that someday." It's like, listen, the chances of you going out there and pushing that lawnmower are very slim. So give
Mhm.
it away and let's, focus on keeping the things that you might actually need.
Well, and I would also wonder too, when people are thinking about what they're trying to accomplish and they're trying to get organized and they're thinking about how that's going to be helpful for them, their families, their emotional state, all of these sorts of things. And not that we want to get rid of things that feel wasteful, but I would also wonder if there are certain things that maybe they really aren't very expensive, but they're big in size. Like maybe asking yourself, like, if it is okay to buy it or find it again later down the road, like, if that time comes. I mean, I imagine that that's a decision everybody has to make for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really push people to donate as much as possible because
Yeah.
I feel like it's a positive way to let things go. You're helping somebody else and yeah, and a lot of times these items, especially nowadays, that would the prices of things in some ways have gone down, and their lifespan is shorter.
Mhm.
So, if this is something like big, but you're not using it right now, why don't you wait and buy it when you're really going to need it so that you
Yeah.
can maximize it and get a good one and get the one that you really need and it's really going to help you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, okay, so again, so a lot of the people who are listening, they are very overwhelmed. And if they, have, a huge house, it's full of mess, it's full of clutter, just the idea of the project itself, I know can be very overwhelming for them as well, just even trying to start. And so when they don't know where to start, what do you typically recommend is just like a first step, the first thing that they could do in those situations?
So, when I go to visit a client, we walk around the whole house and I take notes,
Mhm.
and I take photos if they'll allow me. And then I'll say, so what is bothering you the most? Like, why did you bring me here today?
Mhm.
And, is it like, what's the thing that's out of control? Is it is it paper? Is it the kitchen? Is it the kids' rooms? Is it the basement? And sometimes these things are all interrelated. It's like, we don't have space here, so we threw things down here, and now this space is overwhelmed, and or we had a flood, and now everything came up, and so it's like sometimes things are all interrelated. But I try to find like the core thing that's really going to alleviate the biggest pain point to start,
Mhm.
and then, and so whatever that like, let's say it's the kitchen,
Mhm.
and then, um, I work like a clock. Whatever the room is, I'm gonna work like a clock. I'm gonna start in one far corner, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna move like a wave, and I'm just gonna kind of like a laser across the room and take everything out and and then put it back and take it out and put it back, and everything's gotta come out. And so, but I do think asking yourself the question of like, what's really bothering me?
Mhm.
Where is our struggle? Like, am I losing things? Like, are the kids bringing things home from school and I'm losing them because they're ending up in a big pile
Mhm.
and I don't have time to sort through it and it's mixed with the mail and so the notes aren't getting signed so and so if that's the crux of the problem, let's focus on addressing the intake of paper. Like, where is it coming in? Where does it need to be for me to actually look at it? How involved do the kids need to be in knowing where things are too, or where they should put things for mommy to look at, kind of thing. Like, so setting up these little systems. And I do a lot of role playing with people. Like, let's go get the mail together. Where
Mhm.
does the mail come in? When do
Mhm.
you pick it up? What are you usually doing when you're picking it up? Like, are you coming in from the car holding 27 different things? Or do you make a separate mail run? And when you come in, where does it go? Where does
Mhm.
it need to go? Where do you pay your bills? Like, it comes into the foyer, but your office is upstairs. How do we get it from point A to point B so actually can get like these things can get accomplished? So doing a little bit of that with yourself, like a walkthrough.
Mhm.
What's the ideal way that this should work? And then let's try to like figure out, and the internet's such a great resource. So like if you kind of have a good understanding of like, okay, this is a big problem for me. Let me do some research on like what other people are doing around this and then tailoring it to me because everyone's home is different and, all these situations are very unique. So,
Mhm. Well, and it sounds like, there are a lot of strategies. You really help people sort of think about their own behaviors and how are they going to, what are they going to do to try to keep things organized. But what about like, because obviously the one thing that is much harder to control are the other people in the household, right? And especially kids, right? So it's you get things organized and then the kids are undoing it or immediately making it a mess again. What
uh,
kinds of things do you recommend moms to help with, in terms of managing that?
so I definitely think like old or young, don't make it hard on yourself to organize. That's always the lesson. So don't
Mhm.
don't have expectations of your children that they're going to be able to do a task. Like for example, when I moved into my house originally, there was a hallway and it had a sliding door closet, glass mirrored sliding doors with very high bar to hang coats.
Mhm.
And my kids at that time were like, 9, 7, and 5. No child was gonna walk into my house, take a hanger out, and put their coat on the hanger and put it in that closet. Like,
Mhm.
that behavior was absolutely something that I couldn't expect my husband to do. I barely was gonna do it, so how are these 3 kids gonna do that when they come home? They would come home,
Mhm.
and it was like a dump. They would just like everything falls off their body, and they just keep walking. So, we I had the ability to change that because we ended up tearing that closet out, but putting hooks up at the level of the child and saying, and I used to like make I used to be in advertising, so I would
Mhm.
make the jingles for everything, and it was like, "Don't make me take a second look, you better put it on the hook," kinda thing, and so it was like, when they'd walk in the door and it is behavior modification, it's like,
Mhm.
they'd walk in the door, you'd be like, "Hang up your jacket, hang
Mhm.
up your jacket," and, like, after a while, they would start doing it, but, like, it's like and that's how they learn their routine at school, those teachers have them on a you walk in the door, you go to your cubby, you hang your stuff up, they do that and they create that routine and then the kids learn that behavior. So you have to do a little bit of that at home. They come in, please hang up your coat, please put your school bag in the little cubby wherever it belongs, take out your homework, go to the table, like I don't know what that looks like and who's organizing that. Like maybe that's not the mom at the time if
Mhm.
she's working and someone else is dealing with that. But setting that whoever's doing it is setting that up so that those things keep happening. And then, because the hook is at the level of the child, they'll be able to hang it up, as opposed to it's an impossible task, so I'm just gonna drop it on the floor.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you talk about behavior modification and, that consistency, right? Just that constant reminder until they're essentially like conditioned to, hang the coat up or whatever it is. But, when you talk about like these age appropriate things, it also sounds again like really sort of managing expectations around what they can do, what they're realistically going to do,
Right.
and that sort of thing. So,
Yeah. I I just wanted to add something to that. When
yeah.
we moved into our new house, we would come into the front door, and so the drop was happening in my living room,
Mhm.
and I wanted them to use that side door and come in through that entrance because I wanted to try to start training them to put things at least in the closet area.
Mhm.
So, they would come home from school, and they would come to they would get dropped off at the school bus, or they'd walk home, and they would be at the front door ringing the doorbell, and I wouldn't let them into the house. And I would scream through the door and I'd be like, "You have to walk around the side." And it took like a week for them to figure out that mom was not gonna let them in the front door of school because our entrance is gonna be on the side. And now no one uses that front door because they have like the traumatic memory of mom locking them out. But it's like, I'm like, "You're not coming in this door." I don't know how else to explain this to you. So definitely
Well,
behavior.
see, and my kids, so our garage leads into a mudroom, and we 99% of the time do come through the garage, so we don't have that problem, but the challenge I run into is my kids literally walk through a mudroom, and my kindergartner still brings his bag into the through the mudroom to the next room over and, like, drops everything on the floor, and so that's something that we're working on, but we'll get there.
Keep working on it. Keep working on it.
Yeah, I feel like every family, every kid, is
Yeah.
different. So, one of the things that I talk to moms about a lot with all sorts of things, I mean, we're obviously talking about organization and whatnot, but I talk about strategies and then I also talk about mindset work because I generally feel like there's a combination of both at play. We've already talked about feelings of guilt and expectations and those sort of things. But I'm just curious, are there things that you see moms really sort of focus on a lot or put their manage their expectations and put a lot of pressure on themselves in regards to organization that maybe really isn't that important? Maybe it would just be a lot less stressful for them if they did focus on other things with regards to organization?
Um, I'll use the example of I used to have a kitchen in my kitchen, like the play kitchen was in my kitchen, so my kids could play in their kitchen while I was cooking dinner. And at the end of the day, they would leave this, all the food would be out and whatever, and I would go to put it away. And I would like organize it by like, it was like meat, poultry, vegetables, fruits, And one day I was like, this is crazy town. Okay.
Mhm.
Why why do
Mhm.
I feel like I have to follow some kind of like USDA guidelines to sort the fake food?
Mhm.
I'm like spending so much time and
Mhm.
they would just dump it out. So I'm like,
Mhm.
why are we doing? So then I was like, okay, that micro organizing to like that level of detail for a child that's not how they play. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
not a child like psychologist, I'm not a teacher, but, like, kids play a certain way with certain things, and, like, that's not how they're playing, like, it's all
Mhm.
mixed up, and they're sorting it out themselves and making their own decisions about it, so, kind of not getting too much in the weeds,
Mhm.
like, sometimes giving yourself broader strokes,
Mhm.
and then maybe fine-tuning certain things that need to be fine-tuned, but, like, sometimes you don't need that level. I also feel like people go the other way where it's like they love these toy chests and things just get dumped into the toy
Mhm.
chest. And it's like, that's where things go to die. They like
Yeah.
all these like little pieces end up on the bottom. And so it's like, those are the two extremes. It's like, having a big giant toy chest is good for big toys. It's
Mhm.
not great for small toys. And then trying to put like a million different containers and cubbies with like, all the different doll shoes and whatever. And sometimes it's like, your child is never going to be able to help you. If you want your kids to help clean up, you've got to, again, manage your expectations and make it not so, the details so minute. Like it has to be like, let's put all the doll accessories here. And then, as they get older, yeah, they can get all crazy and sort out the shoes and all that. But for right now, like we just want to kind of put like with like and make
General
it make
this.
and make cleanup like something that is doable so that they can
Yeah.
participate in it without making it like, okay, mommy's gonna have to do this for you because
Yeah.
the lesson there is then mom will clean up.
Well, and again, so it sounds like general spaces more than specific spaces, finding that balance between the two extremes and also shifting and adjusting based on how old your kids are, developmentally, like what's going to make sense and be
Right.
workable and all of that. Okay. So, what would you say is maybe I feel like organization is one of those things where so many people like would like to be organized, but maybe don't necessarily want to, be doing it, doing the work to get it there. What do you feel like is something that maybe you believe about organization that is maybe a bit unpopular, but you believe it to be true?
Um, so, the idea that, we have way more than we need,
Okay.
especially in the mom space because, like, generations before me were like, "We didn't have that when we were raising babies. We just,
Hmm.
like we had a paper towel and a box of baby formula." I don't know, like,
Right.
it's always like it was an extreme, and then I look now at the things that are available, and I'm like, Wow," like, I didn't have all that stuff, and now it's like there's so many products and it's like, if you don't have those products, like, something bad could happen or, like, this child is gonna grow up in need, and it's like,
Yeah.
there are so many there's it's just so much excess, and it's like, you don't need all of those things, like,
Yeah.
maybe some of them are really helpful, but if you don't have them, it's not going to be like your kid is not gonna grow up.
Well,
Your kid's
yeah,
gonna get
no.
stunted.
And I love that you said that because I feel like it also sort of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, this idea of maybe you don't need to hold on to things for fear that you're gonna need it later because maybe maybe there are certain things that you could at some point use later, but maybe don't really need them, So it sounds like maybe
Right.
that's something that people don't always think about. So, okay. So, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I've asked I feel like we've crammed a lot into a short period of time.
We
I feel like
sure
we've
have,
really
yeah.
talked about a lot of things. Before we kind of start to wrap up for today, if people want to, learn more about you, find out more about the work that you do, where can they go to do that?
So, my website is stowandbehold.com. And, that has, like, how to contact me, and I often field questions from people who are
Mhm.
like because I do speaking engagements, and so I kinda put myself out there as a resource. If you have something you wanna donate, especially moms with baby items, there are a lot of charities that won't take baby items. There are charities that do,
Okay.
and they are, especially, like, here in Long Island where I live, I have a couple of places, and so or, like, medical items and things like that, like, a little bit like something a little bit niche, like, I welcome people to ask me those questions. I'm happy to share websites and information about that. So that's one way to reach me. I'm also on Facebook, Stow and Behold on Facebook, on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn, for professional kind of
Mhm.
contacts. But
Okay.
that's me.
Okay, great. And I will, of course, include all of that information in the show notes for anybody who wants to find you or learn more about you. So before we wrap up, one final question I always ask everybody, if you could leave the listeners with one final message, one final piece of advice, what would it be?
So, people are often afraid, I think in all aspects, afraid to get help for certain things. Like,
Mhm.
it's like it makes you vulnerable to ask for help. Um, and so a lot of times people with organizers are like, they have this idea that like, I live in a perfect home and I'm going to come in and judge them. And organizers that I work with and that I know are, we've seen it all. We are regular people and we want to just like, we want to help you achieve whatever the goal is you want to achieve, and we're not there to judge you or to ask, "How did it get this way?" We're just there to say, "How can we make this better?" That's really it. And people are always like, "Oh, your home must be so perfect." And I tell them that I have 3 teenagers and a husband, and my housemates are not always willing participants in my organizing system. So,
Mhm.
I can put things away relatively quickly, but if you walk into my house there's often a pile of dirty dishes because that's someone's chore that day and they haven't gotten to it yet, and I have to bite my tongue and be patient because I want them to do it, but a lot of times my house is upside down because it's upside down, so,
Mhm.
no, the organizer's house is not perfect either, so don't
Well,
don't stress.
just a reminder that I always say to people all the time is, that perfection does not exist, right? And this is just another reminder of that. Like nobody's
Right.
perfect. Nobody's homes are going to be perfect. All these people are listening. Like their homes do not need to be perfect. It's okay, So So I'm glad I appreciate you saying that. So, all right. Well, I know I've already taken up a lot of your time. And again, I really, really appreciate you being here. As always, for the moms who are listening, if any of this does resonate, if you found any of these things that we talked about to be helpful or valuable, please feel free to look up Tina. Please share this podcast with other moms that could maybe use some additional support because we are all in this together.
Great. Thank you.